The great chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 10,000 years. Its walls were made of living crystal that grew slowly over centuries. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated seats, arranged in circles that rose like steps in an ancient theater. Today, every seat was full. Today, the air itself seemed to tremble with tension. Ambassador of the hegemony stood at the central podium. Her body was thin and graceful, covered in scales that shifted color with her emotions. Right now, they were pale, the color of fear. Her translucent wings, usually held proudly behind her back, were pressed tight against her body. She held a data crystal in her trembling fingers. "Honored members of the council," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I bring news from the contested zone." High Chancellor leaned forward in his elevated seat. He was ancient beyond measure, his body made entirely of living crystal that caught and bent the light in strange ways. When he moved, it was slow and deliberate, like a glacier shifting. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like stones falling into deep water. "Speak, Ambassador. What has happened in the contested zone?" Activated the data crystal. A holographic image appeared above her head, showing a star map with flashing red markers. 3 cycles ago, the Armada entered the zone. They brought 300 warships. Their intention was to claim the sector and eliminate any resistance. Murmurs spread through the chamber. They were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors. Their ships were massive, their weapons devastating, their mercy non-existent. When they decided to take something, they took it. No one had successfully opposed them in over 200 years. "The humans sent a response fleet," continued. The murmurs grew louder. Humanity was new to the galactic stage. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. Their technology was primitive compared to the elder races. Their fleet was small, their resources limited. What could they possibly do against the Armada? "How many ships did the humans send?" asked General of the Empire. He was a large creature, his body covered in thick armor plates that had evolved over millions of years. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he waited for the answer. Scales turned even paler. 12. Silence fell over the chamber. Complete, absolute silence. Then, slowly, sounds began to emerge. Some representatives laughed bitterly. Others made sounds of pity or disgust. A few simply shook their heads in disbelief. 12 ships against 300, said. "Then the humans are dead. There is nothing more to discuss." "No, General," his voice cracked as she spoke. "The humans won." The silence that followed was different from before. This was not the silence of disbelief or pity. This was the silence of fear. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space still glowing with the heat of recent battle, the Earth vessel, Relentless Dawn, drifted through a field of debris. The debris had once been 300 warships. Now it was nothing but twisted metal and frozen bodies spinning slowly in the void. Captain sat in her command chair, reviewing the battle data on her tablet. She was 43 years old, with auburn hair cut short for practical reasons and eyes that had seen too much death. Her uniform was rumpled, stained with coffee and sweat. She had not slept in 2 days. Commander Jake stood at the main viewport, watching the debris drift past. He was younger than tall and dark-haired, with the kind of face that smiled easily. He was not smiling now. "Intelligence reports are coming in," Jake said without turning around. "The council has called an emergency session. They're talking about us." Did not look up from her tablet. "Let them talk. We did what we had to do." Jake finally turned to face her. "You rammed 3 of our ships directly into their command vessels. You told the crews to evacuate into escape pods while the ships were still moving at attack speed. That's not normal. That's not something anyone does." They didn't think anyone would do it either. Set down her tablet and met his eyes. "That's why it worked. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons and missiles. They weren't configured for kinetic impacts. A ship moving at full speed hits harder than any weapon they were prepared for. We destroyed 3 of our own vessels. Empty vessels, every crew member evacuated. We recovered every single escape pod. Not one person died. Stood up and walked to the viewport to stand beside him. Jake, we were outnumbered 25-1. We didn't have better weapons or stronger shields. We only had one advantage. Which was, they couldn't predict us. They've fought hundreds of species across thousands of years. They've seen every tactic, every strategy, every trick, but they've never fought anyone crazy enough to sacrifice their own ships as weapons. She watched a chunk of hull tumble past, its surface still glowing faintly from the heat of its destruction. They didn't know what to do, and by the time they figured it out, it was too late. Jake was quiet for a long moment. The council is scared of us now. You know that, right? Good, maybe they should be. These are the people we're supposed to be building relationships with. We're new to the galaxy. We need allies, trade partners, technology sharing agreements. We can't afford to have everyone afraid of us. Turned to look at him, and there was something hard in her eyes, something forged in the fires of 100 battles on 100 worlds. Jake, do you know why I joined the Navy? He shook his head. Because when I was 12 years old, raiders attacked my colony. They killed my parents, my brother, and everyone I knew. I hid in a storage container for 3 days until rescue arrived. She looked back out at the stars. I swore then that I would never hide again. I would never wait for someone else to save me. I would become strong enough to protect the people who couldn't protect themselves. And you have. You're a hero. Everyone knows that. I'm not a hero, I'm a survivor, and survivors do whatever it takes. She placed her hand on the cold glass of the viewport. That would have killed millions of innocent people in that sector. Men, women, children, they wouldn't have cared. They would have laughed while they did it. Her voice dropped to nearly a whisper. I showed them what happens when you threaten people under my protection. I showed them that humans don't play by their rules. And if that makes the council afraid of us, then at least they'll think twice before they try to push us around. Jake had no response to that. He simply stood beside her, watching the debris field slowly disperse into the infinite darkness of space. Behind them, the bridge crew worked in quiet efficiency, running damage reports and coordinating with the other ships in the fleet. They had all heard the conversation. None of them disagreed with their captain. They were humans, after all. They came from a world that had been trying to kill them since the beginning of time. Fear was something they had learned to use, not something they ran from. And now, the galaxy was beginning to understand that. 3 standard galactic cycles passed after the battle in the contested zone. During that time, the Galactic Council did nothing but argue. Some representatives wanted to declare humanity a threat and organize a combined fleet to contain them. Others argued that this would only provoke the very conflict they feared. Still others suggested that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity could be useful. In the end, they reached a compromise. They would send an observer to study human military doctrine. They would learn everything they could about how humans thought, how they fought, and most importantly, why they fought the way they did. Only then would they decide what to do. The observer they chose was General of the Empire. He was considered the finest military mind in the galaxy. He had studied the tactics of over 200 species. He had written 17 books on warfare that were required reading at every military academy in known space. If anyone could understand the humans, it was him. General arrived at Earth's orbital station with 4 armed guards and a translation drone floating beside his head. The drone was programmed with over 10,000 languages, including 17 human dialects. Had insisted on the guards, though he knew they would be useless if the humans decided to attack. He simply felt more comfortable with them present. The docking bay was clean and efficient, nothing like the ornate chambers of the council. Everything was metal and glass and blinking lights. It smelled of recycled air and machine oil. Found it oddly comforting. These were a practical people, he thought. Perhaps they could be reasoned with. Admiral Grace was waiting for him. She was older than he had expected, with silver hair cropped short and eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform was covered with ribbons and medals that he did not recognize but understood instinctively. This was a warrior. This was someone who had seen death and dealt it in equal measure. "General," Grace said, extending her hand, "welcome to station." Had studied human customs before his arrival. He knew that the hand gesture was a form of greeting, a way of showing that one carried no weapons. It felt strange to press his armored palm against her soft flesh, but he did it anyway. "Admiral, the Council has sent me to assess whether humanity poses a threat to galactic stability." Grace smiled at him. It was not a threatening expression, but somehow it made uneasy. There was something in that smile that suggested she found his mission amusing. "Then let me show you exactly what we are," she said. "Follow me." The briefing room was small compared to the council chamber, but it was packed with equipment. Holographic displays lined the walls. Computers hummed quietly in the corners. A large table dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with maps and documents. A young officer stood at the front of the room. He was perhaps 30 years old, with brown hair and an earnest face. His name tag read Sam Price. He nodded politely as entered. "General, thank you for coming. I've been asked to explain our military philosophy to you." Sam activated the first display. "I understand that to the galactic community, our tactics appear reckless. Some have called them insane. I want to show you why they're not." The display showed a blue and green planet spinning slowly in the void. Earth had seen images of it before, but never like this. Sam zoomed in, showing mountains and oceans, forests and deserts, cities and farmlands. "This is where we come from," Sam said. "Do you know what the galactic classification for Earth is, General?" Nodded slowly. "Class 12. "That's right. A planet with conditions so hostile that sentient life should not be able to evolve there. And yet we did." Sam changed the display to show a series of images. Earth has extreme temperature variations. Some regions can be 50 degrees below freezing. Others can reach 60 degrees above. Sometimes this happens in the same location, just months apart. The next image showed a massive wave of water crashing against a coastline. 70% of our planet is covered by water. This water contains salt that will damage most galactic technology. It also contains creatures that will eat anything they can catch. We swim in this water for recreation. Felt his secondary heart begin to pound. He had known Earth was dangerous, but seeing it laid out like this was different. "Our atmosphere contains high levels of oxygen," Sam continued. "This means that fires can start easily and spread quickly. It also means that metal rusts, structures decay, and nothing lasts forever without constant maintenance." He pulled up another image, this one showing a massive storm system viewed from orbit. "These are called hurricanes. They form over our oceans and can devastate entire regions when they make landfall. Wind speeds can exceed 300 kilometers per hour." "How do you survive such events?" asked. "We build stronger buildings. We develop early warning systems. We evacuate when we can and rebuild when we can't." Sam's voice was matter of fact. "General, we've been fighting our own planet since before we could walk upright. Every generation has faced extinction-level threats. Ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, eruptions. We survived all of them." Admiral Grace stepped forward. "General, you asked if we pose a threat to galactic stability. Let me ask you something in return. In your military career, have you ever fought an enemy that treated death as acceptable?" Considered the question carefully. Some species are willing to die for their cause, the martyrs, the suicide soldiers. "That's not what I mean. Those species die because they believe death brings glory or religious reward. I'm asking if you've ever fought an enemy that simply wasn't afraid to die. Not because they wanted to, but because they had accepted it as a possible outcome and moved on." was silent for a long moment. "No," he finally admitted, "I have not." Grace nodded. "That's what makes us different. We come from a world where death is always close. We grow up knowing that any day could be our last. A car accident, a disease, a natural disaster, a random act of violence. We learn early that life is precious precisely because it's fragile." She moved closer to him, and he resisted the urge to step back. "So when we go to war, we don't fight to avoid death. We fight to protect the people we love. And we're willing to do anything, sacrifice anything to keep them safe." Sam pulled up footage from the battle in the contested zone. It showed a human ship, burning and broken, accelerating toward a command vessel. At the last moment, escape pods launched from its hull like seeds from a dying flower. Then the ship struck its target, and both vessels disappeared in a ball of fire. "Every person on that ship survived," Sam said quietly. "The captain stayed at the helm until the last possible second to ensure the impact was successful. Then he ejected and was recovered by our rescue teams." Stared at the footage. "He was willing to die." "He was willing to die," Grace agreed. "But he didn't have to, because we planned for his survival. We always plan for survival, General, even when we're doing something that looks insane." She placed her hand on his armored shoulder. The gesture was strange, almost intimate. "We don't throw lives away. We spend them carefully and only when necessary. And we always, always bring our people home." Left the briefing room 3 hours later. His mind was spinning with everything he had learned. He had come to Earth expecting to find barbarians, savages who fought without reason or restraint. Instead, he had found something far more frightening. He had found a species that understood death better than anyone else in the galaxy. A species that had made peace with their own mortality and used that peace as a weapon. As his shuttle departed from station, began composing his report to the council. He was not sure how to explain what he had learned. He was not sure they would believe him. But one thing was certain. Humanity was not insane. They were simply playing a game that no one else in the galaxy knew how to play, and they were very, very good at it. Ambassador had not slept in 4 cycles. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the holographic footage from the contested zone. She saw human ships burning as they charged toward the enemy. She saw escape pods launching into the chaos of battle. She saw the Armada, the most feared military force in the galaxy, reduced to scattered debris in a matter of hours. She had studied humans extensively since the battle. She had read every report, watched every recording, analyzed every piece of data she could find. And the more she learned, the more confused she became. Finally, she requested a private meeting with the human delegation. She needed to understand. She needed to see them face to face and ask the questions that kept her awake at night. The meeting was arranged for a garden dome on station. It was a neutral space, filled with plants from multiple worlds growing side by side. The humans had designed it as a place for peaceful conversation, a reminder that different species could coexist and even thrive together. Captain and Admiral Grace represented humanity at the meeting. They arrived first and waited near a fountain that recycled water through an artificial waterfall. The sound was meant to be soothing, but neither of them felt particularly calm. "You think she's going to threaten us?" asked, adjusting her uniform collar. Grace shook her head. "No, I've been reading her psychological profile. Is a scholar, not a warrior. She's genuinely curious about us. She wants to understand." "That might be worse. Understanding leads to strategy. Strategy leads to countermeasures. Or it leads to friendship." Grace gave a sharp look. "Not everyone is an enemy, Captain. Some people just want to learn." Ambassador entered the dome a few minutes later. She moved slowly, her delicate feet barely making a sound on the polished floor. Her scales were a deep blue color, which had learned indicated thoughtfulness and concern. Her wings were folded neatly behind her back. She stopped in front of one of the many earth plants growing in the dome. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. You grow weapons in your gardens, she said softly. Blinked, those are roses. We give them to people we love. Reached out and touched one of the thorns with a slender finger. A drop of blood, pale green in color, appeared on her skin. She did not seem to notice. The flowers are beautiful, she said. The scent attracts insects that help them reproduce, but the thorns are sharp enough to draw blood, beauty and danger woven together. She finally turned to face the two humans. Everything on your world is like this, isn't it? Grace stepped forward. Ambassador, you asked for this meeting. What is it you want to know? Was quiet for a moment. Then she did something that neither human expected. Her eyes, large and compound like an insect's, began to fill with moisture. Tears. They were not known to cry. It was not something their species did under normal circumstances. They attacked my once, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was before I was born, but I grew up hearing the stories. They came without warning, as they always do. They demanded our surrender. When our government hesitated, they began bombing civilian centers. She walked slowly toward the fountain, her wings trembling slightly. 40 million of my people died in a single day. Our military doctrine said we should retreat, preserve our forces, and petition the council for intervention. That was the accepted strategy. That was what made sense. What happened? Asked quietly. We retreated, we petitioned the council, and by the time help arrived, 30 million more had died. Tears were flowing freely now, leaving wet trails down her scaled face. 70 million people gone, entire cities reduced to rubble, families erased from existence. She turned to face directly. When I watched your ships attack I expected to see the same thing happen to you. I expected to see your people die by the thousands while your leaders calculated acceptable losses. But that's not what I saw. What did you see? Grace asked. I saw your captain send her crew to safety before sacrificing her ship. I saw your pilots risk their lives to recover escape pods in the middle of a battle zone. I saw your medical teams treating wounded enemies alongside their own soldiers. His voice cracked. You lost no one, not a single life. You destroyed 300 enemy ships and didn't lose a single person. She moved closer so close that their faces were only inches apart. How is that possible? Felt her own throat tightening. She had not expected this. She had expected suspicion, accusation, maybe even fear. She had not expected grief. We don't leave people behind, she said simply. Ever, not if there's any chance of saving them. But why? What makes human lives so valuable that you would sacrifice ships, resources, strategic advantages, just to save a few individuals? Because they're not just individuals. They're our people, our friends, our family, reached out and did something that surprised even herself. She took his hand in her own. The ambassador's skin was cool and smooth, like touching polished stone. Ambassador, on Earth we have a saying. No one left behind. It's not just a slogan. It's a promise. It's the foundation of everything we do. Stared at their joined hands. Physical contact between species was rare in galactic culture. It was considered intimate, sometimes even inappropriate, but she did not pull away. The council fears you, she said. They see your willingness to sacrifice as proof of instability. They think you are unpredictable and dangerous. And what do you think? Grace asked. Looked up its face, at the eyes that had seen so much death and yet still held compassion, at the mouth that could order the destruction of an enemy fleet and still smile at a friend. I think the council is wrong, she said. I think your willingness to sacrifice ships is proof that you value lives above all else. I think your unpredictability comes not from madness but from love. Her wings spread slightly, an involuntary gesture of emotion. You would die for each other, and somehow that means you rarely have to. Felt tears forming in her own eyes. She had spent so many years being strong, being hard, being the unbreakable warrior that her people needed. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be understood. Ambassador, we're not monsters. We're not trying to conquer the galaxy or destroy other species. We just want to protect our people and find our place among the stars." "I know," squeezed her hand gently. "I came here today expecting to find enemies. Instead, I found something I had forgotten existed." "What's that?" "Hope." The ambassador's tears had stopped, but her eyes were still wet. "For the first time since I learned about my tragedy, I have hope, because now I know that there is a species in this galaxy that would never abandon its people, a species that would fight impossible odds rather than accept defeat, a species that values every single life as if it were the most precious thing in the universe." She released hand and stepped back, composing herself with visible effort. "I don't know what the Council will decide. I don't know what the future holds. But I want you to know something, Captain Admiral. Whatever happens, you have at least one ally among the stars. The hegemony will not forget what we have learned today." She turned and walked toward the door, her wings now spread wide in a display of respect and gratitude. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. "Thank you for showing me who you really are. I only wish my people had met you 100 years ago. Perhaps then, 70 million of them would still be alive." She left without another word. And Grace stood in silence for a long time, listening to the gentle sound of the fountain and the distant hum of the station's engines. Finally, spoke. "Do you think she meant it, about being an ally?" Grace nodded slowly. "I think she meant every word, and I think that's the most dangerous thing we could have done." "Dangerous? She's on our side now." "Exactly. One alien ambassador has seen the truth about humanity. She's going to tell others. And slowly, gradually, the galaxy is going to realize that we're not the monsters they feared." Grace turned to look at with an expression that was equal parts pride and concern. "We're something far more frightening. We're proof that a species can become the most compassionate, loyal, and determined people in the universe. And that's going to change everything." The Empire did not accept defeat gracefully. For 200 years, they had dominated every conflict they entered. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful, their soldiers more ruthless than any other species in the galaxy. The idea that 12 primitive human vessels could destroy 300 of their finest warships was not merely insulting. It was unthinkable. So they did what they had always done when their pride was wounded. They issued a challenge. The message arrived at Earth's Central Command exactly one standard month after the battle in the contested zone. It was broadcast on all frequencies, in all languages, with no attempt at secrecy. They wanted everyone to know what was coming. "To the humans of Earth," the message began, "your victory in the contested zone was a fluke, a trick, a coward's tactic. You destroyed empty ships and claimed it as heroism. You are not warriors. You are vermin who got lucky." Admiral Grace listened to the message in her office, her face showing no emotion. Around her, senior officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This voice was harsh and grating, filled with contempt. "We challenge you to prove your worth. Meet us in the neutral expanse in 30 cycles. Bring your best ships, your finest warriors, your greatest commanders. We will bring 100 vessels. If you can defeat us in open combat, witnessed by the entire Council, we will acknowledge your species as worthy opponents. If you fail, we will burn your planet to ash and salt the ground with the bones of your children." The message ended. The room was silent. Captain was the first to speak. "They're giving us 30 cycles to prepare. That's almost insulting." "They want us scared," Grace replied. "They want us to spend those 30 cycles imagining what they'll do to us if we lose. Fear is a weapon to them." "What are we going to do?" asked Commander Jake. Grace stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned with cold indifference. Somewhere out there, 100 warships were being prepared for battle. Somewhere out there, aliens were sharpening their weapons and practicing their cruelty. "We're going to accept," Grace said, "and we're going to win." The Galactic Council approved the challenge with suspicious speed. Many representatives secretly hoped that would solve their human problem for them. Others simply wanted to see the spectacle. A few, including Ambassador, voted against the approval, arguing that it was nothing but organized murder. Their objections were noted and ignored. The human fleet gathered in the neutral expanse on the appointed day. 20 ships in total, the largest force Earth had ever assembled in one place. They were outnumbered 5-1, but they had faced worse odds before. They had faced worse odds and won. Captain Danny commanded the lead ship, Valor's Edge. He was younger than most captains, only 35 years old, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to look right through whatever he was examining. His crew loved him. They would follow him into the heart of a star if he asked them to. All ships reporting ready, his communications officer announced. They are entering the zone now. Danny watched the main display as red dots appeared on the edge of the screen. 100 of them, arranged in perfect formation. The valued precision and order. They believed that discipline was the foundation of victory. They were about to learn otherwise. "Open a channel to the fleet," Danny said. "All ships, this is Captain. You all know why we're here. You all know what's at stake. I'm not going to give you a speech about duty or honor or any of that nonsense. I'm just going to remind you of one thing." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "We don't die today. We don't leave anyone behind. We fight smart, we fight hard, and we go home together. That's the mission. That's the only mission. Out." The battle began with the firing first. They launched a barrage of energy weapons that would have destroyed most fleets in seconds. But the human ships were not where they expected them to be. They had already begun moving, scattering in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully choreographed. "Group Alpha, execute Maneuver 7, Danny ordered. Group Beta, draw their fire to Sector 12. Group Gamma, prepare for close engagement." The human fleet moved like a school of fish, each ship knowing exactly where to go and what to do. They had trained for this moment for years. They had studied every battle ever recorded. They knew their enemy's tactics better than the enemy knew themselves. They tried to adapt. They split their formation, sending smaller groups to pursue the human ships. But every time they thought they had cornered a target, the target would suddenly reverse course and be replaced by 3 more. It was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. "They're getting frustrated," Jake reported from the relentless dawn. "Their formation is breaking down." "Good," Grace replied from her command center on station, watching the battle through relay satellites. "Frustrated enemies make mistakes." The first major turning point came when the flagship targeted the Valor's Edge. It was a massive vessel, 3 times the size of any human ship, bristling with weapons and armored with the strongest materials in the galaxy. Its captain had decided to end the battle personally by destroying the human commander. Danny watched the flagship approach on his display. He saw its weapons charging, saw its escorts falling into attack formation. He had perhaps 30 seconds before they fired. "All non-essential personnel proceed to escape pods," he announced calmly. "Engineering, set the reactor to overload on my command. Navigation, plot a collision course with the enemy flagship." His first officer, Lieutenant West, turned to stare at him. "Sir, you can't be serious." "Dead serious, Lieutenant. Now carry out my orders." The crew obeyed. They had trained for this possibility. They knew their captain would never ask them to do something he wasn't willing to do himself. Within 15 seconds, over half the crew was in escape pods, ready to launch. Danny opened a channel to the fleet. He made sure it was broadcast on all frequencies, so the council observers could hear every word. "Attention fleet, your flagship has made a critical error. It has my full attention." The Valor's Edge, already taking fire from multiple directions, did not retreat. It accelerated. Danny pushed the engines beyond their rated limits, feeling the deck vibrate beneath his feet as the ship struggled to hold together. "Sir, the escape pods are ready," reported. Everyone is clear except bridge crew. Then it's time for us to go too. Danny stood up from his command chair. Everyone out. I'll handle the final approach. Hesitated. Captain, regulations say. I know what regulations say. I also know that I'm not leaving this chair until I see that flagship dead. Now go. That's an order. She went. They all went. Within seconds, Danny was alone on the bridge, his hands flying across the controls as he made final adjustments to the ship's course. The flagship was directly ahead, growing larger every second. Its weapons were still firing, but the Valor's edge was moving too fast and too erratically for them to get a clean hit. Danny could see damage reports flashing on his screens. Hull breaches, engine failures, life support failing. None of it mattered anymore. At the last possible moment, when the flagship filled his entire viewport, Danny did something unexpected. Instead of ramming the enemy vessel, he released the Valor's Edge's entire payload of antimatter torpedoes directly into the flagship's engine intake. Then he yanked the controls hard, sending his ship into a turn that should have torn it apart. The structural reinforcements held, barely. The flagship was not so lucky. The antimatter torpedoes detonated inside its engine compartment, setting off a chain reaction that consumed the vessel in seconds. The explosion was visible from 1,000,000 kilometers away. Danny ejected from his ship just as the Valor's Edge finally gave up the fight and began to break apart. His escape pod tumbled through the debris, but he was alive. He was alive, and the enemy flagship was dead. The fleet fell into chaos. Without their command vessel, they lost coordination. They lost discipline. They lost the very things they had always prided themselves on. The remaining human ships, battered but determined, picked them apart. When the battle ended, 87 vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 13 fled into hyperspace, their crews too broken to continue fighting. The human fleet had lost 4 ships but not a single life. Every escape pod had been recovered. Every crew member accounted for. Captain Danny was pulled from his pod by a rescue team from the Relentless Dawn. He was bruised, exhausted, and grinning like a man who had just won the lottery. "Did we get them?" he asked. Jake helped him to his feet. "We got them, Danny. We got them all." In the council chamber, the representatives watched the battle's conclusion in stunned silence. Several were openly weeping. Others had left their seats entirely, unable to process what they had witnessed. The humans had won, again, and this time the entire galaxy had watched them do it. The council chamber had never been so quiet. Even the air seemed to hold its breath, waiting for someone to speak. The great crystal walls, which had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic history, now reflected the pale and shaken faces of 47 species who had just watched their understanding of the universe collapse. High Chancellor stood at the central podium. His crystalline body, usually bright with refracted light, had dimmed to a dull gray. He looked exhausted. He looked old. He looked like someone who had just seen the impossible happen and was struggling to accept it. "The human fleet has achieved total victory," he announced, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. "The Empire has requested a ceasefire." No one responded. No one knew what to say. General sat in his seat, his 4 eyes blinking slowly as he replayed the battle in his mind. He had written 17 books on warfare. He had studied tactics for over a century, and yet he had never seen anything like what the humans had done. They had been outnumbered 5-1. Their ships were smaller, less advanced, less powerful. By every calculation, every model, every prediction, they should have been destroyed within the first hour. Instead, they had dismantled the fleet like a surgeon removing a tumor. And they had done it without losing a single life. That was the part that could not understand. Not the victory itself, but the way it had been achieved. Every decision, every maneuver, every sacrifice had been designed not to maximize enemy casualties, but to minimize their own. They had destroyed their own ships rather than let their crews die. They had risked everything to recover escape pods in the middle of a battle zone. They had treated survival as the highest priority, above glory, above efficiency, above everything else. It was insane, it was beautiful, it was terrifying. Ambassador rose from her seat. Her wings spread wide, casting long shadows across the chamber floor. Her scales had shifted to a brilliant gold color, an expression of hope and pride that her species rarely displayed in public. "I wish to speak," she announced. High Chancellor nodded. The floor recognizes Ambassador of the Hegemony. Walked slowly to the center of the chamber, her footsteps the only sound in the vast space. She looked around at her fellow representatives, meeting their eyes one by one. Some looked away. Others stared back with expressions of confusion, fear, or reluctant admiration. "My colleagues," she began, "for 3 cycles we have debated whether humanity represents a threat to galactic civilization. We have called them unstable, reckless, and dangerous. We have questioned their sanity. We have wondered whether allowing them into our community would be the beginning of the end." She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly like falling leaves. "We were wrong." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others leaned forward, listening intently. "I have met with the humans personally," continued. "I have spoken with their commanders, walked their stations, studied their history, and I have learned something that I believe every being in this chamber needs to understand." She activated a holographic display, showing footage from the battle's aftermath. Human rescue vessels were moving through the debris field, their searchlights sweeping across the wreckage. But they were not just recovering their own people. They were pulling survivors from the ruins of their ships. "Look at this," said. "The humans are saving their enemies. The same enemies who threatened to burn their planet and murder their children. The same enemies who have shown no mercy to any species they have ever conquered." The footage showed a soldier being lifted from a destroyed escape pod by human medics. The soldier was wounded, barely conscious. The medics treated his injuries with the same care they would have shown one of their own. "This is not the behavior of a species without reason," said, her voice rising. "This is not the behavior of unstable barbarians who fight for the joy of killing. This is the behavior of a species that understands something we have forgotten." She turned to face the entire assembly, her wings spreading even wider. "They come from a world that tried to kill them every single day. They evolved surrounded by predators, disasters, and diseases that would have destroyed any of our civilizations. Their planet has extreme temperatures, poisonous creatures, violent storms, and an atmosphere that rusts metal and burns lungs. And do you know what they learned from all of this?" She waited, letting the question hang in the air. "They learned that the only way to survive was together. They learned that no one gets left behind. They learned that sometimes you have to be willing to sacrifice everything except each other." High Chancellor's crystalline form flickered with complex colors, a sign of deep thought. "What are you proposing, Ambassador?" "I am proposing that we stop fearing the humans and start learning from them." Folded her wings and bowed her head. "I am proposing that we offer them full membership in the Galactic Council, not as observers, not as probationary members, as equals." The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted in a dozen languages. Some protested loudly, arguing that humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too different. Others supported the proposal, pointing out that the humans had proven themselves worthy of respect. Still others simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening. The chaos lasted for several minutes before restored order. "Silence," he commanded, and his voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of authority. "We will discuss this proposal in an orderly manner." The debate that followed was heated but ultimately brief. Representative after representative rose to speak, sharing their thoughts and concerns. Some argued that humanity's tactics were too dangerous to be allowed in civilized space. Others pointed out that those same tactics had just defeated the greatest military threat the galaxy had faced in 2 centuries. In the end, it came down to a simple question. Were the humans allies or enemies? Were they a threat to be contained or a resource to be welcomed? "We will vote," announced. The voting took only minutes. Each representative pressed a button on their console, registering their choice. The results appeared on a holographic display above the podium. 31 in favor, 16 opposed. Humanity had been accepted into the Galactic Council. In the observation gallery above the chamber, Captain watched the proceedings with Commander Jake at her side. They had been invited to witness the vote as a gesture of goodwill, though they had no speaking privileges. "We did it," Jake said quietly. "We're in." Nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. "We're in, but this is just the beginning. The hard part comes next." "What do you mean?" "They've accepted us because they're afraid of us, because they saw what we can do and decided it was better to have us as allies than enemies." She turned to look at him. "But fear fades. Eventually, they're going to stop being afraid, and then we'll have to prove that we deserve to be here for reasons beyond our ability to fight." Jake considered this. "You think we can do that?" Watched as Ambassador accepted congratulations from allies old and new. The swings were spread wide in a display of joy, and her scales had shifted to a brilliant rainbow of colors. She looked happier than had ever seen her. "I think we have to try," said. "We've shown the galaxy what we can do when we're pushed to the edge. Now we need to show them what we can do when we're given the chance to build instead of destroy." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time the smile reached her eyes. "We're not alone anymore, Jake. Neither are they. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to change everything." Below them, the council chamber continued to buzz with activity. Representatives were already forming groups, discussing trade agreements, technology sharing, cultural exchanges. The humans had entered the galactic community, and nothing would ever be the same. In the years that followed, humanity would face many challenges. They would make allies and enemies. They would discover wonders beyond imagination and face threats that made them look like children throwing tantrums. But through it all, they would hold onto the one principle that had carried them from the caves of Earth to the stars. No one gets left behind. Not ever. And that made all the difference.